folks, I'm ready to start a new season of extreme reloading, and in fact it's a new chapter for me. I have never reloaded the 8mm Mauser before, but I have been reloading, as some of you know, for several decades. And this is going to be its own little challenge. So what we have is a late 1940s, early perhaps 1950s vintage M48 Mauser bolt-action rifle in 8mm Mauser, and we're going to reload for it. Now this old gun is going to present us a little bit of a challenge in that we've got to be extremely careful as we're working up the load, because what we don't want to do is to stress this somewhat older steel. So as you can see here, I've got some components already purchased, and by the looks of it, this is going to be a job for Hornady. And it kind of works out pretty good. I purchased Hornady dies. This is their standard, what they call custom grade dies in 8x57JS. And I also purchased a box of Hornady brass. This is 50 cases of obviously 8x57 Mauser, 8mm Mauser. And I've also been shooting, or we've been shooting, this Hornady vintage match ammo, 20 rounds in a box. These were, or are, 196 grain boat tail hollow point bullets. I've got about half a box full still, but these are all empty and they're ready for reloading. Ultimately, we're going to produce this. This is one of the Hornady match 8mm Mauser 196 grain boat tail hollow point bullets. So our round is going to look pretty similar to this. You know, we've been having some pretty good luck with these things. They seem like they're, you know, relatively or pretty accurate ammunition for this old gun. Haven't had any problems at all with any sort of hang fires or anything like that. It is functioning flawlessly, and the gun is functioning flawlessly for us. So I purchased this, you know, but I haven't even opened it up. Came in a while ago. I'm going to go ahead and open this thing up. Now what we have here, this is a bullet seating die right here, and of course my full-length resizing die. Before we ever load with these things, before we ever use these things, we need to make sure that we clean them. That's important because the company, Hornady in this case, they will ship these things out with a preservative, an oil, a grease, whatever on them. It's still a relatively light coating, but we want to get that stuff out of there and make them nice and clean for our reloading process. I like to do them one at a time so I don't make a mistake when I'm reassembling. And all that we really need to do is just take it apart. Full-length sizing die. It has an elliptical expander on it, very standard. Of course, the decapping pin right here. And this is their zip spindle, so we can make adjustments fairly quickly. And this, of course, is the die body. Now, I like to clean these with, who guessed it, it's another Hornady product. This is Hornady's one-shot gun cleaner and dry lube. Hey, it works great to clean the dies for the first time. It puts just a very light coating of a lubricant on it. I mean, an extremely light coating of a lubricant on it. Blasts things out since it's a little bit under pressure. And I've been using this for the last number of brand new dies that I've purchased, and it has worked out really, really well for me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of these cleaning patches, and we're going to start blasting it out a bit. wipe it down. Now the one thing that we definitely want to do, I want to show you, is there is a small hole right here, and we need to make sure that it is clear. What I mean by clear is, remember we said that at the manufacturer, whether it's Hornady or RCBS or Redding, they will put a preservative on here, metal preservative, and if that stuff fills this hole, well, that's just kind of not good stuff for when you are actually doing the resizing. That's almost like a gas escape hole. There will actually be a little bit of pressure built up in there, and nothing dangerous going to happen, but just for the case, you want to make sure that you clean that out. Now I'm just using this little old transistor thing here, making sure I can insert it, and I can also see it inside there. I know I've penetrated fully inside there, and we're going to get out any gunk that might have pushed out. Either side. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then we're going to reassemble. I mean, it's a real simple process. Just took, you pretty much saw it live right there. Just took a couple of minutes. Now what we're going to want to do is also make some adjustments to this die to make sure it's going to work with this particular press. This is an RCBS RS2 press. This is an RCBS shell holder. This is RCBS number 3. If you're purchasing or have purchased a Hornady shell holder, you're going to use a Hornady number 1 shell holder. Those numbers are not standardized across the board. So RCBS shell holder number 3, which happens to also be the same shell holder you'll use for 243 Winchester, 308 Winchester, and so on. So you probably already have one of those. And we're going to screw this die body into the press. And before I get going too far, I'm going to raise the ram to its full height. And now I'm going to screw in the die body the rest of the way, just until it makes contact with the ram, and it just did that. Now, the last step, we lower the ram, and we're just going to give this about 1/8 of a turn, just about 1/8 of a turn. Just about right there. I'm going to feel it again. Now what we're going to do is we're going to feel this make contact, and then just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. And that's more or less camming it over and ensuring that we're going to get an actual full-length resize. I'm going to turn this lock ring down, lower the ram once again. And now the last thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that the decapping pin, the primer decapping pin, is actually extended outside the die body itself. And I usually put it about, about 1/4 of an inch. Maybe it's not quite that far. And it's a pretty easy thing to make a further adjustment with it. If you go a little bit too far, too long, number one, you can snap that decapping pin off during the resizing process, so that's not good. It's not the end of the world. You can always replace them, and they're replaceable parts. You don't have to replace the whole die. But also, if you extend it really too far, what's going to happen is that elliptical expander is actually going to start making contact with the bottom of the case itself, on the inside. And it's not going to, still won't eject that probably properly. So just about 1/8 to 3/16, maybe 1/4 of an inch. And once you think you have it in place correctly, just tighten down right there. And that's about it right there. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to back this out a little bit, and then I'm going to tighten up this ring. To do that, it's pretty easy. If you tighten it up in place, you're going to have a hard time getting it out because it actually almost like binds into the press itself. So normally what I do is I will grab hold of this firmly, the die body and the lock ring. Give it just a little bit of a turn all together. That's all you're going to need, that little bit. Now we're going to get a hex key in there and tighten it up. By the way, these lock rings, I really prefer the Hornady lock rings to the RCBS lock rings simply because how they tighten up. What they're doing is they're tightening this way, tightening the lock ring by closing the gap, and it locks up nice and solid. It's also, everything is steel here. RCBS does a little bit different process. They also have a hex head screw, and you tighten that thing up, and what it does is it pinches, if you want to call it that, into the die body. And that's okay, that's an okay approach, but the problem I'm having with it is that hex key head screw is brass, and the head wants to strip out. I've had that problem. So what I've done on some of my dies is just purchased these lock rings from Hornady and replaced them on the RCBS dies or other dies that I may have had that problem with. This hex head is a 3/32, by the way. So, real common size, easy to do. And then what I do is I'm going to tighten it back up again. Test it, make sure it's tightened up. So I'll try to turn the die body in one direction and the lock ring in another direction. So I have that now tested and it's nice and tight. I'll turn this down all the way and I'll give it one more test. I'm going to raise that ram all the way. I can now feel that it touched, and I should have a little bit of a cam over. That's good. It feels real good. Now let's go ahead and prepare this bullet seating die. It's the same process. Going to disassemble it. We've got a rubber O-ring here, rubber grommet right there. I'll keep that in good shape. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this so I don't spray the cleaner on it. It probably may not be good for that rubber. I'll go ahead and clean it up. It looks really clean to start with. They always do, it seems like, but just a minute or two, take your time, get this nice and clean. That's good. Now we're going to go ahead and reassemble this. That. I'm not going to seat it down all the way because we do need to make the adjustment for the actual bullet seating, and we always start that adjustment with the bullet seating die set as far out as we possibly can without this actually falling out. Now we have our components set, and for the most part, as you saw, I'm using Hornady dies. Now let's talk about the reloading components themselves. And as you know, I'm using Hornady brass. I'm also going to be using CCI large rifle BR2 primers. Now these primers have really served me well over the years. I do experiment with some other primers, but CCI BR2s are really quite a good primer. Then I'm going to fill those Hornady cases with Hodgdon's Varget smokeless powder. Now this is an extreme powder that's not affected very much, although it is somewhat, but it's not affected very much by changes in temperature. It's been a good powder for me, an extremely versatile powder, and I use it in a lot of my different calibers that I'm reloading for. I'm going to top that all off with, well, it's Hornady once again, Hornady SSTs. Now the factory ammo that I was shooting was 196 grain hollow point boat tails, good bullets. I'm going to go a little bit lighter on my reloads. It's 170 grain SST. Now the reason why I'm choosing the SST, because my son, who's really shoots this rifle far more than I do, is thinking about potentially using this for some deer hunting, and it's a fine caliber for that. So 170 grain SST. The SST is what is a little bit more important here. SST stands for Super Shock Tip, and it really is designed more as a hunting round than a precision rifle or target round or anything like that. So that's really the reason why I chose the SST, and you don't have that many choices in 8mm Mauser, so 170 grain bullet should do quite nicely. Well, in the next episode, we're going to get reloading. We're going to start with some case prep. We'll talk about full length resizing and neck sizing on the next episode of Extreme Reloading. Thanks for watching.